Hello, hello, and welcome to Apple Jams, your Beatles and solo Beatles hangout. I'm so glad to see you here, so glad you could come. I have one little baby request, and that is if you would please me by smashing a like on this video and subscribing if you haven't already. That would really help me if you can. So, I've just watched Man on the Run on Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the cinema to see it, so this is the first that I'm getting to see it. Second, I should say, because I did have it on the day that it came out, but I was working that day, so I couldn't give it the attention that it needed. I have now managed to sit down and watch the whole thing, and what can I say other than absolutely loved it. So I'm a not a casual fan. I absolutely love the Beatles. I absolutely love Wings. I absolutely love Paul McCartney and John and George and Ringo. I have like all of their albums. But what I would say is that I'm not a historian. And, I can fully imagine that you might go into this thinking, well, is there going to be anything new? Am I going to find out anything? And from my point of view, as a casual fan, I keep saying casual, but I'm not a casual fan. It's just that I haven't read every inch of every line of text of their histories. I've read what I've read, and to be honest, it's mostly focused on the Beatles. I don't know that much about the Wings or the solo eras, although I'd say that's getting better all the time. What this is very much a love letter to Wings, and quite right as well, because Wings are amazing and they're not given nearly enough credit when put alongside, the Beatles. I mean, the amount of output that Paul had over his entire career, it's absolutely wrong to focus on just the Beatles. I think it's basically a legacy piece. Like Paul wants to kind of own the narrative of the post-Beatles period, and he's honest with it. He's at times he tackles how he thought about John's How Do You Sleep. He addresses the fact that, he's often considered to be at times quite uncool and, embarrassing dad-like, I suppose. What this documentary does really well, I think, is it kind of focuses on him and his family and, like how he's feeling at certain moments, and it's very intimate at times. There's a lot of kind of behind the scenes home video stuff that they've got in there. I mean, it's full of great music, but it doesn't dwell on the music. It's more about like how he's feeling, the times and the place, the emphasis that is put on family. And in particular, I mean, like there's some really cute videos of the kids. But what comes through a lot is Paul and Linda's relationship. Now, in terms of relationship goals, we should all aspire to be in a relationship like the one that Linda and Paul were in, I should say. It's quite obvious that they are absolutely devoted to each other. There's some really kind of like heartfelt loving shots that you see of them looking at each other in the film, and it speaks for itself. They were barely apart for the whole of Linda's life. It's really nice to see that kind of like endearing affection. And indeed, whilst we're talking about Linda, it's also good to see that she gets defended. I wasn't around at the time, so I couldn't tell you anything about like how Linda was treated in the 70s, but it sounds like that she, from what they've put in the documentary, it sounds like she received similar kind of vitriol to Yoko. I'm not necessarily saying anywhere near as much, but there's talking heads of some fans who are quite unpleasant about her, and they defend that. And I can't remember which one of the daughters it is. I think it might be Stella who defends her specifically with regards to that section, but quite right as well, because Linda's part of this story is absolutely as supporting Paul, but also being an equal partner in Wings. I think is really important to recognise. Like, it just speaks to the times, I suppose, that you have like two really strong-minded women entering the lives of these established men. And they get ripped to shreds in the media and in society. It's hopefully we've moved past that kind of thing. Speaking of Paul being uncool as well, like I quite like his rationale for why he, when he addresses that, he kind of like says, well, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he kind of says, well, there were people around that time who wanted to be, the voice of the revolution and to be quite, provocative and, down with the establishment and things like that. It's okay for some people, and it wasn't for him. and I can respect that. It's much better than being insincere. I found it quite interesting. At one point, they're talking about the emergence of punk and new wave, and they go to the Cavern, or well, not the original Cavern, but the rebuilt Cavern on Matthew Street in Liverpool, and they speak to somebody that works there. And they're making the point that, the youth have moved on from the Beatles and, aren't necessarily interested in what Paul McCartney is doing anymore, or even Lennon and Harrison. And they speak to this girl who says, "Oh yeah, we got a birthday card for John Lennon last week." And the interviewer says, "Where did you put that?" And she goes, "Put it straight in the bin." And I find it quite ironic that, yeah, she's painting a picture that, the Cavern Club has moved on, and yet if you go to the Cavern Club today, go around Matthew Street, you can't move for references to the Beatles. Like there's the Hard Day's Night Hotel on the corner, there's Sergeant Pepper's next door, there's Rubber Soul across the road, there's the Cavern Pub across the road from the Cavern Club, which is a different venue, and that has a statue of John Lennon right outside. So yeah, I just found that quite ironic. I guess there's a lot more money in the baby boomer generation of today than the time poor and poor younger generations that the Cavern would have, historically appealed to. One of the interviewees for the documentary is Chrissie Hynde, and she refers to Mull of Kintyre as being like a timeless classic, and that's not the first time I've heard that be referred to with regards to Mull of Kintyre in particular. I remember reading an article a long time ago, and again I'm paraphrasing, but the writer was saying something along the lines of, when he's at his best, McCartney can write songs that you'd assume had just been around forever. And there's two instances of that I'd point to in this documentary, because I completely agree. Like, McCartney at his best writes absolutely timeless songs. One of which I'd agree is Mull of Kintyre. That you could imagine that being like some kind of folk classic. And in a similar way, and it's a song that I've never heard before this documentary, although I'm aware that it's on I think the Red Rose Speedway archive collection on a DVD in there as part of the James Paul McCartney TV special, is Gotta Sing, Gotta Dance. And I'm really excited that it's coming through on the soundtrack CD, which I've got on order. But I'd never heard that before. And again, it's another one. I mean, it's not a great song. I've only heard it a couple of times, so maybe it'll grow on me. Goodness me, this could have come straight out of the 20s for all I know. There's a moment towards the end where Denny Laine is talking about the Wings lineup after the London Town era, when it reverted back to Denny, Paul and Linda. And he's referring to it as like not the real deal, like Wings in name only or something like that, which I found interesting because, I mean, obviously that lineup was the same lineup as Band on the Run, and you can't get any more Wings than that. So he must be referring to like a different musical direction. Is he talking about like things changed from that point of view rather than from a personnel point of view, which may explain, his feelings towards London Town and Back to the Egg. They, invariably were very different changes of direction, and coming towards the end of Wings' career, they were relative flops compared to what had come before. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment. I'd be interested to know what Denny, unfortunately we'll never know, but what Denny really meant by that. It's very honest of Paul to talk about his final show, and they do the Wings' final show, and they show a bit of footage of Arrow Through Me from that performance, and yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, he was just having a bad day, wasn't he? But yeah, quite an honest thing for him to say. It's also really nice to hear Sean, Lennon and John refer to Paul so warmly towards the end of the documentary. Obviously, this is a documentary that's been signed off by Paul McCartney, and he clearly wants to make sure that the narrative fits his, showing him favourably, I suppose. He's not shying away from the fact that they had a big falling out and he had to sue the Beatles towards the start of the documentary. What we don't want is any kind of suggestion that they were at each other's throats right until the very end, because it's simply not true. They had their ups and downs, but I think John says something like, well, if I can't have an argument with my best friend or my brother, then who can I have an argument with? And it's absolutely right, and shouldn't take away from how close they were and how much of a close bond that they had together. And I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but they put an instrumental of waterfalls underneath the footage of John Lennon in New York just in the run up to talking about his death. Thought that was quite haunting, to be honest, given the fact that Waterfalls is a song about warning a lover to take care and not take risks. Was that intentional? Who knows? And we have to address that interview, you know, the one that where the media was like in Paul McCartney's face on the day that John Lennon died. And there's been a lot said about like how cold he appears to be, and you know how almost, I think Sean says that people referred to it as being robotic. Now he has his own take on that, which you can see in the documentary. My take on it is that Paul has said himself that there is a version of Paul McCartney that is him and genuine, and there is another version of Paul McCartney that he puts on, and it's this kind of Paul McCartney character for the cameras, you know, the woo and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably because of that he got a bit of a reputation for being a bit embarrassing dad at times. Do you know what I mean? Because it is an act and it's not genuine and people can see through it. Anyway, with regards to that interview in particular, like you can tell that he is grieving. Like he is almost robotic. He's there for the cameras. He understands that, you know, the media are going to want to get his take on this horrific event. So he's in Paul McCartney mode. He's got his guard up. And that's why he comes across as he does. But he's feeling it. You can see it in his eyes. And I don't know if you've ever felt it, but, you know, that feeling of, for goodness sake, whatever happens, do not let your emotions show. For goodness sake, whatever happens, do not cry. I've certainly felt it. And, you know, when you feel it coming, when you feel that kind of feeling of, I just want to show how this has made me feel, you know, it's really difficult to stop. So he says that line. He says it's a drag, isn't it? And that's a clumsy line, of course it is. But I feel as though what he's trying to say there is he's put up this guard, but he doesn't like it. He wants to be true to himself. Just for a split second, he lets his armor fade for a moment, and he's vulnerable, and he's wanting to get across to this person on a human level. This is how I'm really feeling about this. But he's confused because he's between that feeling and the guarded feeling, the feeling of like not being able to speak his mind. I mean, this is all just me theorizing, but I'd like to bet that's what's going on because, you know, there's no way that event didn't affect him profoundly. Was it Stella who described his reaction to getting the phone call, and she mentions that it's an undescribable reaction, like something that she'd never seen before. She doesn't go into detail, and that's fair enough. And then he just walks out the door and stands in the garden. She portrays the fact that it was, you know, seismic to him. So yeah, I mean, like, I've never bought the idea that, you know, he was uncaring or cold in that moment. He's not himself. He's been affected by something that none of us should have to experience, the, you know, untimely death of what is a brother at the end of the day. So yeah, that's what I think about that. There's obviously more to this story, and I do wonder if, like, having had this, because it ends shortly after Lennon dies, and obviously there's no more Wings anymore. I mean, we don't see any more of the 80s. There's plenty of peaks and troughs yet to come. I really hope that this story's picked up because this documentary was fantastic. And what do I mean about it being better than the anthology? I mean, from my context, I've seen Anthology before, and so it was never going to, you know, the recent Disney Plus showing of it, as great as it was never going to be revelatory. There was never going to be any particular shock moments or moments of revelation. And similarly, my favourite bit of Anthology is that last episode, which is new, which is very, very intimate and showing obviously not John, showing Paul, George and Ringo get back together in the 90s as part of the Anthology project, and how warm they were together, and, you know, how nice it was to see them jamming and working on these songs and you know, speaking warmly and openly about the Beatles period. That more human aspect, I think, is very much relegated to the last episode of Anthology, and yet it runs through this entire documentary, and I think that's what I want to see. You know, obviously we want to know about the historic events, and we want to, you know the timeline and, you know, what happened and how, but I think mostly we want to know, we're emotive people, and we want to see people be, and we want to know about these relationships. And, you know, how did people feel about each other? What did Paul feel about Alan Klein? How did he react to How Do You Sleep? You know, what was his response to Linda getting vilified in the press? How did he deal with his flops? How did he deal with his gigs that didn't go well? I absolutely love Anthology, don't get me wrong. But in terms of the impact, this has been absolutely wonderful in a way that the Anthology just couldn't match. Obviously, having seen it before, but I think hopefully you know what I mean by that. But what do you think? What did you think of Man on the Run? Have you only just seen it on Amazon Prime? Did you manage to catch it in the cinema? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. I'm really interested to hear them. Let me know your favourite parts of the documentary. Like, was there any big revelations for you? Things that you didn't know before? Favourite songs or versions that you might have heard in the documentary? I think I will go so far as to say I still don't think it's a great song, but it was really nice to hear Gotta Sing, Gotta Dance. I'm looking forward to getting that on the soundtrack album when that turns up. So let me know the best bits for you. My favourite bits were all of the candid home videos of Linda and Paul and the kids in the farm in Scotland and in various other places, which really showed you the tightness of their relationship, which was really nice to see. Okay, guys, that's all from me. All that's left to say is ta-ra for now, and thanks for watching.